Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so I like to move around, and so you'll excuse me when I'm moving around and talking a little bit. Well, thank you for inviting me, and what an amazing group of people. Ella, we actually use some of your liter of light. There is actually a real bonus to Coca-Cola in some parts of the world. Can use his liter of light. And what a fascinating talk about food, and can't wait to catch up with Rosie later about that one. But right now, I'm going to just talk about something that's very close to our hearts, a project that we're involved in. In 1994, my mother was 60 years old. Well, both my parents were 60 years old, and we were standing in the queue waiting to vote in the first democratic elections in South Africa. And she was voting for the first time, and I was 18, and I was voting for the first time. And I just remembered when she turned around and looked up into my face with tears in her eyes and said, "I never thought I'd be alive to see this day." And I know millions of South Africans stood in queues and waited for hours and hours to put pen to paper that would demonstrate that they were equal citizens in their own country. It was a real moment of joy. One of the things that I can certainly say about our country, and in particular about my mum, is that when I was 18, I didn't really appreciate that moment. I didn't really understand that moment. But what I do know is that I've never forgotten that moment that we were able to represent ourselves as equal citizens in the country. Now, the beauty of South Africa is in its perfect imperfections, its turbulent past, and its miraculous transition. But it's a country, like many other countries in history, that has brought shame to humankind, but at the same time taught it so much. Now, that turbulence will never actually leave us. We will continue to carry our shame as South Africans throughout our lives, because that's our legacy. And it's a badge that we will carry throughout history. And we will wear it for as many reasons as there are differences in the Rainbow Nation. But one of the things that I want to bring to you and talk to you about, the many things that have united us as a nation, are as divisive as they are unifying. And it comes down to finding the commonalities that motivate and inspire in a meaningful way. What we found were those things that we felt brought us together were actually things that were fleeting. They were moments in time. And those fleeting moments we had to find something that we could build that had longevity, that could exist while still maintaining its meaning. Another fleeting moment, a very important moment for South Africa, is when we hosted the World Cup 2010. And the nation united to welcome the world. We expected hundreds of thousands of visitors to our shores. And like all countries in Africa, unfortunately, we are painted and tarred with the same brush. And whilst I'd love to sit here and dance with Shakira, as Ilek and I were suggesting would be a wonderful thing to do, I've danced with Shakira many times. I want to point out something, why we are tarred with the same brush. You know, Munira talks about Africa, and when she reflected about Africa, what was interesting is she was talking about India, Africa, and South America. And it's really interesting because Africa is always just this one country, but it's not. It's many, many countries, and so is South America. It's a multitude of countries, and we're very, very different from each other. But again, we get tarred by the same brush. What I want to point out to you, just if you'd bear with me for a few minutes, is two examples of why we get tarred with the same brush. So, patient zero was a child identified patient zero in the Ebola crisis of 2014 was identified in a place called Meliando in Guinea. And Meliando in Guinea is 9,000 kilometers from Johannesburg in South Africa. South Africa had 0 cases of Ebola, just to let everyone know. Now, across the Atlantic, is New York. And New York is 7,200 kilometers away from Meliando. And there were, in the US alone, there were 11 cases of Ebola, 2 of whom unfortunately passed away. Now, which country was more affected by the Ebola crisis, you would say? Well, we lost almost 12% of US visitors to South Africa because they were afraid that they would be infected by Ebola immediately after that crisis. And those are examples, that is one example of how we're affected by a simple thing, how we're one country, but we're actually nowhere near what would be the ground zero of the Ebola crisis. Another example that I'd bring forward would be in this year. Thailand was struck with a terrorist attack and experienced probably a 20% of cancellations in trips to Thailand. Yet, there was 5 months before the FIFA World Cup, there was an attack on the Togolese team in the north of Angola, in a place called Cabinda, which is thousands of kilometers away from the borders of South Africa. And we experienced a 25%, we experienced less than 25% less visitors for that World Cup as a result. Now, that happened 5 months before, and we're impacted by this idea that we're one continent. But I'm not here to moan and groan about these things. I'm here to actually talk about something completely different. But the world's collective ignorance of the African continent means that we have to work 3 times as hard, basically. Nonetheless, we produced a World Cup, and we produced one of the safest World Cups ever held. Now, national pride was at its highest levels ever. Every South African had flags flying. We put it on our cars. We put it all over the place, in our offices, in gardens, and in our homes, all over the place. And this was just us saying how proud we were as Africans to be hosting the World Cup and to be welcoming all these people to our shores. But when the tournament ended, we had to find a way to keep the flag flying. So we came up with this campaign that removed commercial barriers and asked marketing agencies and communication companies from around the country to respond by keeping the flag flying for 30 days. And the response was unprecedented. The nation-building drive went into print and outdoor in movie houses all over the place and on TV, and everyone put that symbol, keep flying the flag, for 30 days. But it still wasn't enough. It was still fleeting. What we realized was that we had to think of something that wasn't as fleeting as a World Cup or a campaign, but a living monument to people so divided by history, yet somehow so united by belief. That living monument had to be so big that it would become a world first. So big that it celebrated the global triumph of a nation that successfully transitioned out of segregation and legislated oppression. So big that it could be seen from space. So everyone...
When we unite around the symbol of our hard-won freedom, the South African flag. Picture a South African flag the likes of which has never been seen. Covering 66 hectares of land, that's 66 FIFA-sized football fields. It will be visible from space, the biggest flag ever constructed. But what makes it truly awe-inspiring is that it will be almost entirely organic. The colors of the flag will be composed of desert plants and succulents that thrive in this landscape, a celebration of the botanical beauty of the Kamdaboo. Around 3 million individual plants will be planted to make up the giant flag. And the flag's black triangle will be a massive field of solar panels harnessing the power of the sun to provide a substantial 4 megawatts of sustainable energy, equivalent to the needs of 4,000 homes. The impact of the giant flag on the lives of people living in the area will be as visible as the flag itself. Implementing the project will directly create over 700 full-time jobs, involving everyone from planters and horticultural scientists to maintenance and security staff. There'll be a massive upskilling of local human resources with training for electricians and solar technicians, builders, botanists, administrators. The sightseeing appeal of this man-made natural wonder will also have a significant impact on the tourism in the area. In every sense, economically and emotionally, the area will be transformed forever.
So it will, when completed, become the first living flag that can be seen from space, and that is completely self-sufficient in terms of power, in terms of water, in terms of biodiversity, and in particular, in terms of revenue. And it will be completely owned by the people. And so a lot of these amazing individuals who you're going to hear talk today about their projects will be able to explain, and I'm sure many of you understand that as well, how difficult it is to start projects like this. It took almost 4 years for us to go through the environmental impact assessments, to seek approval from government and the local community and get buy-in from the local community. But at the end of that time, we'd done soil erosion studies and economic and social development practice papers to prove that this is a completely self-sustaining project. But we're finally at that place where we can say that we're about to break ground. We will be seeding in the adjacent nursery the 3 million the cacti that are going to, and desert succulents that are going to basically form the colors of the flag. But of course, big ideas need big supporters and even bigger budgets. So we're still trying to raise the $25 million that's needed to put this project together so we can hand over a complete project to the community without debt or encumbrances, and in particular to ensure the continued support of the residents and neighboring towns in that area.
A project of this magnitude needs big thinking to get to the next level. So, we're going global, the World Wide Web, to be precise. We will invite people, not only South Africans, but from around the world, to be part of this historic initiative. Through our user-friendly web interface, you'll be able to choose and adopt your own plant or plants. You'll receive confirmation of your adoption, including a unique GPS coordinate. And by logging in, you'll be able to see exactly where your plant is and monitor the organic growth of the giant flag over time, decades in fact. What's more, as an active member of the giant flag community, you'll be kept updated with every development, construction milestones, jobs created, electricity generated, lives changed.
So we just had to break for that ad break. Yes, I am trying to sell it to you as a concept. Yes, we do want you to be involved with us because we can't do it alone, and that's a fact. What we did know by creating a campaign, by creating an idea like this, is that it needed to last forever. And I don't know if you're all aware, but the Statue of Liberty was crowdfunded actually. And it became the icon of the US, for example. And we believe that the same thing can happen here, that this will become a national symbol and an icon for our country in South Africa. But it also is something that every single person can participate in. And what I've done is I've bought a plant for my mother and father who in 1994 voted for the first time, so that they will be remembered forever when they do pass eventually. And I will be able to remember that moment and them by giving a piece of history, or by buying a piece of history in the future for them, so I can remember my beautiful mum. Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate it.